The funny thing about betrayal is how quiet it is at first. Not a dramatic slap or lipstick on a collar, just the subtle wrongness of normal things. Like your wife using the slow cooker on a Wednesday, when you both know she works late at the hospital and never cooks midweek. Or when your shared Spotify playlist starts getting flooded with love songs in a language she doesn't speak, Turkish, I later found out. But it all clicked the day I noticed our daughter's dance recital video on the living room TV had been played again while I was at work. Someone had scrolled through it, paused on a shot of her clapping and smiling in the front row, then rewound and watched it 3 more times. The timestamps told me that, but the real punch came when I realized I hadn't been the one watching it, and she'd told me she was in surgery that whole day. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I just stood there, toothbrush in hand, listening to the running faucet, and felt that icy, precise shift in my chest, the one where love goes to die and calculation is born. It was fascinating how she got sloppier once she thought she had me fooled. Her phone began to stay face down more often. Her work calls suddenly required her to step out onto the porch. And the biggest tell? She started humming while cleaning. She never hummed. She hated housework. But now, she folded laundry like it was foreplay and made jokes about the dryer being too hot, just like me. That's when I started following the crumbs. Not out of paranoia, out of quiet, surgical curiosity. I traced the anomalies like a surgeon follows a shadow on an MRI. And there he was, Eric, the man I'd shaken hands with once at a neighborhood fundraiser. Wife. 2 kids. House with the perfect lawn. I remember watching him talk to my daughter for a minute that day and thinking, good guy. She always did have a taste for men who projected virtue. But I didn't rage. I learned. I downloaded. I compiled. I cross-referenced. Her hospital shift logs didn't match the dates of emergencies. The toll transponder on her car logged bridge crossings at times she was supposedly asleep beside me. I even saw her handwriting change a little in her shopping lists, like she was playing house with someone else, writing almond milk in cursive like she was auditioning for a softer version of herself. And then came the piece de resistance, a shared Google Doc they forgot to log out of, still titled with a pathetic inside joke, Project Escape. I read every line, every secret plan, every fantasy about how they'd start over and create a new family, one that's based on honesty. Honesty. That word hit me like dry heaving. But the best part wasn't the discovery. It was the performance I put on after. I cooked dinner. I laughed at her jokes. I played footsie under the table and let her believe she was winning the long con. And when I was ready, when I had everything, I found her lover's wife, Monica. We met in a bookstore, of all places. 2 strangers passing like characters in a Russian novel, except this wasn't fiction, and I had screenshots instead of prose. She didn't cry when I showed her. She didn't faint. She asked one question. When do we end it? And I said, together. So I booked a table at that rustic little cafe downtown, the one with the violinist on Sundays and just enough privacy for a perfect storm. I told my wife we had a reservation, just the 2 of us, a romantic night out. Monica did the same with Eric. We timed it perfectly. My wife showed up in a red dress I bought her last Valentine's Day. I let her sit, let her order wine, even complimented her perfume. You smell different, I said. New scent. She smiled and said, trying something bold. I said, fitting. 5 minutes later, Eric walks in and freezes like a man caught naked at a church service. Monica's behind him, calm, poised, controlled. My wife's smile faltered when she saw them. And then I placed a folder on the table. Not a thick one, just enough. Photos. Messages. Calendar logs. She reached for it, but I slid it to Eric instead. Thought you 2 should see what your honesty looks like from the outside. And I turned to Monica and said, your call. She looked at them, then at me, then simply said, we're done here. My wife tried to speak. Eric stammered something about not knowing. I stood. You do now. Enjoy your new life, built on the ashes of 2 families. And I walked out into the night, the sound of broken dreams trailing behind me like jazz. They say you only notice the silence when you've gotten used to the noise, and looking back, I think that's how it started. Small pockets of silence where her laughter used to live. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Her job at the hospital was demanding, and she'd started talking more about compassion fatigue and emotional burnout. I nodded, supported her, made her tea at night, told her she didn't have to explain anything because I trusted her. That was my first mistake. The second was ignoring how often she began using the word I instead of we. I think I need to start running again, she said one morning, still sweating from a 5-mile jog that I hadn't even noticed she'd left for. I've been thinking of joining that yoga retreat next month. It's just women, really empowering. I smiled, encouraged her, even helped her find a better travel bag for the trip. She kissed my cheek and called me her rock. And yet, the more I supported her, the less she seemed to need me. She used to call me at work just to hear my voice. Now, even when she was home, she barely answered texts. "Sorry, babe, back-to-back surgeries today. I didn't even see my phone," she'd say with that tired smile. But then I'd see she'd posted a picture of her latte art at some downtown cafe at the exact time she was supposedly in the OR. Just once, I asked, "Rough surgery, huh?" She blinked, hesitated a little too long, then nodded. "Yeah, very rough." That's when I began noticing the tone in her voice, the way she said babe, like she was trying to remember how it used to feel. Her hugs became less like embraces and more like placeholders. She still kissed me goodnight, but never with her eyes open. Then came the boundaries talk. Out of nowhere, over dinner, she said she wanted to redefine personal space. That maybe we should spend a few evenings apart each week so she could reconnect with her inner self. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She got defensive, just a flicker of something sharp behind her pupils, and said she'd read about it in a self-help book. "I just need to figure out who I am outside of being a wife," she said. "Don't you want that for me?" Of course I did. I thought I did. I told myself this was what mature couples did, support each other's journeys. But soon after that, her phone began going into Do Not Disturb mode more often, and she started locking it, something she'd never bothered to do in our entire marriage. I noticed new clothes appearing in her wardrobe, stylish, daring, expensive. Tags from boutiques I'd never heard of, receipts she left in her coat pockets like breadcrumbs dropped by a careless liar. I saw an Uber charge for a hotel downtown on a night she said she was staying late for emergency surgery. I stared at it for an hour, questioning everything, heart in my throat, logic tangled with denial. Maybe she stopped there to use the bathroom. Maybe she had dinner at the restaurant inside. Maybe. But the truth was there, pulsing quietly beneath the surface. Still, I didn't confront her. I couldn't. I wanted to believe the woman I loved was still buried somewhere under all that deceit. She started talking more about dreams, but none of them included me. She wanted to open a wellness studio. She said, something holistic and woman-centered. "I've already been looking at spaces," she added casually while we were brushing our teeth one night. I asked if she'd like me to help with the business plan. She didn't even look up from the mirror. "I think I want to do this one solo. It's important for my growth." Growth. That word began to rot in my ears like a dead tooth. Her version of growth was a vine crawling out of our home and wrapping itself around another life, one I was never meant to see. Her laughter returned, but it wasn't mine anymore. It came in bursts when she texted someone else, when she checked her phone and bit her lip trying to hide the grin. I told myself I was paranoid. I gaslit myself like a fool. Until one afternoon, I found a brochure in her car for a couple's resort in Sedona. Our anniversary trip? No, the dates didn't match. She told me she was attending a surgical seminar that weekend. But the booking was in her name, just her name. No return ticket. No guest listed. The brochure had handwritten notes on the back. Ask for the red suite, book the massage early, and one line that made my stomach cave in. Tell him it's a medical conference. I stared at those words, my fingers trembling, my chest hollow. And still, I didn't confront her. Because I had to be sure. Because love doesn't die clean, it decomposes slowly, and I needed to smell every foul inch of its decay before I buried it. I drove home that night and smiled when she asked about my day. I kissed her forehead and told her I was proud of her. But inside, something vital had shifted. My heart wasn't breaking anymore, it was hardening. She smiled back, soft and sweet, but her eyes flicked toward her phone the moment it buzzed. And for the first time in my life, I realized my wife was in love with a version of herself that no longer needed me. It was a Tuesday, completely unremarkable, gray, the kind of day you forget unless something happens to burn it into your brain forever. I had left work early to surprise her with takeout from that overpriced vegan place she always pretended to love, even though I knew she still snuck burgers when she thought I wasn't looking. I pulled into the driveway just as her car was backing out, fast, like she was late for something that mattered more than me. She didn't see me. Her windows were up, music blaring, some upbeat indie track she never used to like until recently. I waved, stupidly, pointlessly, like a dog greeting its owner through glass. She didn't wave back. Just sped off, tires grinding against the curb like they couldn't get away fast enough. I sat there in silence, engine still running, and for reasons I didn't understand at the time, I opened the trunk of her car. Maybe I was trying to unload her gym bag like I'd done 100 times before. Maybe I was just looking for a reason to feel useful. But what I found instead was a second pair of men's sneakers, size 11, not mine, and a shirt folded neatly beside them. Not a gym shirt. A crisp button down, cologne still clinging to the fabric like a ghost. That scent, I'd smelled it before. Not on me. Not on any friend. But once, faintly, in our sheets, when she claimed the dog had rolled in someone else's cologne at the vet. My fingers froze around the fabric, cold panic crawling into my throat, and still, I said nothing. I didn't call her. Didn't scream. I closed the trunk slowly, deliberately, like a man placing a body in a casket. I went inside and waited. No lights on. No music. Just me and the low hum of the refrigerator and the sickly silence between the walls of what I now knew was not my home. It was a stage, and I had been cast as the fool. I sat on the couch and stared at the front door like it might confess something to me if I just waited long enough. And when she came home 2 hours later, hair slightly damp, lip gloss freshly applied, she looked surprised to see me, like I'd stepped out of a memory she had already buried. "You're home early," she said, voice just a little too high. "Yeah," I replied, standing slowly. "Thought I'd surprise you." I walked past her, kissed her on the cheek. Her skin was colder than usual. She set her purse down too carefully, eyes darting to it once, then to me. I asked her about her day, made small talk. She told me she'd had to stay late and give a presentation to some donors, something about funding for medical equipment. I nodded, smiled. "Must have been exhausting," I said, watching for the twitch in her jaw that always came when she lied. There it was, just a flicker. She didn't ask about my day. She never did anymore. That night, after she fell asleep, I took her phone from her nightstand, not to snoop, not to invade, but because by then, I was past needing permission. I opened her photo gallery, not the messages, not the call logs, just the gallery. And there it was, a mirror selfie taken hours earlier. Her, half-dressed, makeup flawless, in a hotel bathroom I didn't recognize. But that wasn't what broke me. It was the detail in the reflection. Her phone screen was visible in the mirror, notifications lit up behind her. A message preview. It read, "Wish I could wake up to you every day." From a contact named E. Not even hidden. Not even disguised. Just E. The same initial embroidered on the cuff of that button down in her trunk. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt distance. As if I had just been pushed through the back of my own skull into a place beyond pain. I closed the phone, placed it back exactly where I'd found it. And then I lay beside her, wide awake, listening to her breathe, slow, steady, peaceful, like someone who believed they were safe. That's when I knew. Not suspected. Not feared. Knew. She had already left me, her body just hadn't caught up yet. And in that moment, something inside me sealed shut. My love, my hope, my softness, all locked behind a door I would never open again. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling and began assembling the machine of my revenge, bolt by bolt, in my mind. Because now, the performance was over. And I had just stepped off the stage, no longer the fool, but the executioner. It started with her calendar. Not the digital one. She knew I could see that. No, it was the small leather-bound planner she kept in her tote bag, the one she used for personal reflections and goal setting. I waited until she was in the shower, steam fogging up the mirrors, her phone playing those lo-fi beats she suddenly loved so much. I pulled the notebook from her bag and flipped to the current week. Most of it was filled with motivational phrases in colored ink, passive-aggressive affirmations like, "I owe no one an explanation," and "My energy is sacred." But one phrase kept repeating on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Core work, 5:30. I knew she wasn't at the gym. Her key fob logs had stopped registering on those days. So I set a calendar alert on my own phone, innocuous and quiet, just a reminder that at 5:30 p.m., she was lying to me. That week, I worked late and used the time to check traffic cams near her supposed gym. Nothing. No entry, no exit. Her car didn't even pass the street. So I took it further. I created a fake email, set up a fake Instagram page, followed a few yoga and wellness influencers to make it look real, then began following the pages she liked. Within a day, she followed back. I'd met her a simple message. "Hey, love your vibe. We should totally collab sometime. I run a women's empowerment circle." She replied in an hour, all sunshine and emoji hearts. She told this stranger more in a week than she had told me in 2 months, mentioned a new connection, a reawakening, and my personal favorite, He doesn't understand me the way he does. So there it was. Still no full name. No photos. Just little trails of crumbs I knew would lead to something real. I stayed silent. At home, I asked how yoga was. She smiled. Lied. Told me she'd pushed herself hard that day, that her abs were sore. I made a mental note to check her fitness tracker's step count. When she went to sleep, I synced it to my phone. It had been on her wrist all day, but she hadn't burned more than 80 calories, certainly not the result of any core work. Next, I started ordering small, trackable deliveries to her on-call location. Just stupid stuff, gift baskets, thank you cards from patients, a faux professional-looking envelope marked confidential from a non-existent lab. She never got them. When I asked if anything arrived at the hospital, she looked confused, then said, "Oh, probably the admin lost it. They're so disorganized." I smiled and said nothing. That was the moment I knew she wasn't even showing up. So I started mapping her movements through our joint bank account. She'd been careful with cash, but not careful enough. A boutique hotel showed up every Thursday night with a $14 parking fee and a $9 drink from the bar. Same time, every week. Her explanation for those nights? Emergency surgery. I nodded like a dumb, faithful husband and made a mental list of every lie she'd told. I didn't need a PI. I had Google Maps, transaction logs, and a memory that was now sharper than ever before. She was predictable in her carelessness, unaware that the more brazen she became, the clearer the picture got. And I wasn't just looking for her. I was looking for him. That's when I remembered Eric, the man I'd met months ago at a school fundraiser. The one she'd insisted we sit next to. The one who, in hindsight, laughed just a little too hard at her jokes and touched her arm when he thought I wasn't looking. I found his wife on Facebook, Monica. She looked exactly like the kind of woman who believed in hard work, PTA meetings, and monogamy. I created another profile. Sent her a friend request. Waited. When she accepted, I began liking photos carefully, one every few days, nothing obvious. Then I sent a message. "Hi. I think we might need to talk about something." Woman to woman. She didn't respond immediately. But 3 days later, I got a reply. "What is this about?" That was the first domino. I didn't dump everything on her. I teased it out slowly. Told her I suspected something. Told her I had dates, times, receipts. She went quiet for a day. Then she sent me a screenshot of a message from her husband. It said, "Can't wait to see you again. Thursday can't come fast enough." Same room. That was the final confirmation I needed. She didn't know that I knew everything, and I didn't want her to. Not yet. Let her keep planning her little fantasies. Let her giggle at her phone and call me babe, like it meant anything. Let her keep lying to my face while I quietly built her crucifix behind her back. Because now I was done being the husband. I was the ghost in the room, the silence between her words, the shadow that watched her move through our life like it was still hers. And she had no idea that the man she thought was being fooled had already figured out how to burn it all down, with elegance, precision, and just enough time to make sure she choked on the smoke. The day of reckoning arrived dressed in a tuxedo. It was a hospital gala, an annual fundraiser where everyone pretended to be saints in silk, sipping overpriced wine while patting themselves on the back for donating to causes they rarely thought about once the night ended. She'd been obsessing over it for weeks, more than usual. New dress, new heels, hair appointment booked 2 weeks in advance. "You'll look so handsome in that suit I like," she said that morning, kissing my cheek like we weren't walking toward a firing squad she didn't know was waiting. I played along. Smiled. Let her adjust my cufflinks. Drove her there with the kind of calm only someone armed with truth can maintain. The ballroom was lit like a cathedral, glass chandeliers, low amber light, everyone soaked in the illusion of class and control. I greeted the board members, shook hands with surgeons I barely knew, let her drape herself on my arm like a trophy. She was glowing, alive in a way that used to make me proud. Now I knew better. When we sat at the dinner table, I could feel the electricity in her, checking her phone when she thought I wasn't watching, stealing glances toward the far corner of the room. That's where Eric stood. Alone, sipping whiskey, scanning for her with the subtle hunger of a man used to forbidden tastes. Monica, his wife, was sick, conveniently absent. She didn't know I'd invited her anyway. But she'd show up. Oh, she'd show up. The moment came during dessert, when the event MC began playing a slideshow on the massive screen above the dance floor, photos of surgeries funded, lives saved, doctors at work. It was all boring, predictable PR. Until it wasn't. Halfway through the reel, the photos glitched. Then a new image appeared, grainy, but clear enough. My wife. In a hallway. Her legs wrapped around a man. His face turned toward her neck. Her wedding ring clearly visible as she clutched his shoulder. Silence fell like a guillotine. Murmurs rippled like a disease across the room. The next slide? Her, lying in a hotel bed, topless but covered in sheets, holding up a peace sign like it was some kind of slumber party. One final image, a screen recording of the message she sent from her secret Instagram account. When I'm with you, I forget I ever had a husband. She stood abruptly. Her fork clattered to the plate. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Everyone was staring. Eric had gone pale. Someone dropped a glass. And then, like a puppet on faulty strings, she turned to me and whispered, "What did you do?" I stood calmly, buttoned my jacket. "I wanted them to see who you really are," I said softly, my voice cutting through the gasps like a scalpel. She blinked, processing, then laughed, a brittle, cracked sound. "It's not what it looks like," she said, grabbing my arm. I didn't flinch. We were just talking. That hallway was at a conference. I tilted my head, almost curious. That must have been one hell of a conversation. She started to speak, but I held up a hand, just 2 fingers, quiet, precise. "Next comes the part where you say it was a mistake," I murmured. "Then you'll blame me for not being attentive enough. Then you'll say you were lost, confused, and that it meant nothing." Her mouth opened, closed. She stepped back. "You never paid attention to me," she said, voice rising just a touch, desperation cracking through the edges. "I tried to tell you. I needed space. I cut her off with a smile. You needed validation. And now you have a room full of it." Her face twisted. "You're not innocent," she snapped. "You're cold, distant, always trying to control everything." I nodded slowly. "Including now." She scoffed, folding her arms. "You can't handle that someone else made me feel alive." And there it was, the smug defiance. The mask slipping into mockery. She stepped closer, voice lower. "You think this makes you powerful? It makes you pathetic. No real man would do this in public. You just humiliated yourself too, genius." That's when Monica arrived. She walked in wearing black, like mourning a marriage already buried. People parted around her like she was made of fire. She walked straight to Eric, looked him in the eye, and said, "Our children are with my sister. Don't come home." Then she turned and walked out. Eric looked like a balloon with the air punched out. My wife turned back to me, and that's when fear began to crawl into her eyes. Real, unfiltered fear. Not of violence, not of pain, but of exposure, of consequence. "We can fix this," she whispered. "Please, just talk to me." "Not here." I stepped forward, looked into the eyes of the woman I had once promised to grow old with, and said with dead calm, "The only thing I'm interested in fixing is the narrative. And now everyone sees the truth." She reached for me again, and I let her hand hang in midair. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just looked at her like she was already gone. And as the silence tightened around us like a noose, I saw it. The exact second she realized she hadn't just lost me. She had lost everything. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. No grand apologies. No tearful collapse. Just silence, and then the rusted machine of her manipulation started groaning back to life. It began the night after the gala, when she came home to find her closet half empty and the guest room already made up with the precision of a man who planned to never sleep beside her again. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, mascara still faintly smudged from the night before, and said nothing for a few seconds. Then the voice came, trembling at first, like she didn't quite believe this was real. "So that's it?" she asked. "You humiliate me in front of everyone, and now you're just going to what? Sleep in here like a moody teenager?" I didn't answer. I kept folding the last shirt and set it in the drawer. She scoffed. "Wow, you think this makes you the better person?" I walked past her without a word, brushing against her shoulder like she was furniture I no longer needed to acknowledge. "You're pathetic," she snapped. "You think you're so righteous? You think you've never hurt me?" I turned to her, finally, eyes cold, voice flat. "I didn't sleep someone else and lie about it." She flinched, lips parting like she wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Just a half-breath. "You smothered me," she tried again. "You controlled everything, every decision, every moment. I couldn't breathe around you." I tilted my head. "But you managed to breathe just fine between hotel sheets." Her eyes narrowed. "You were boring," she said, spitting the words like venom. "Predictable. Lifeless. I needed something real." I walked toward her slowly, stopped inches from her face, and whispered, "Then you should have looked in a mirror before chasing a fantasy." She slapped me. Not hard, not even shocking, just desperate. The way a child lashes out when they've lost the game. I didn't even blink. This wouldn't have happened, she hissed, if you were a real man. I smiled for the first time since the truth came out. Not because it was funny, because I'd been waiting for that exact line. If I wasn't a real man, I said, you'd still be lying. But here we are, and everyone knows what you are now. That cracked something in her. She stumbled back a step, tried to recover, voice trembling with a new strategy, pity. You don't understand what I've been through, she said, voice softer now, almost pleading. I gave everything to this family. Everything. And I got nothing in return. I turned away, grabbed my watch off the dresser. You got a life without bills, without burdens, without consequences. Until now. She followed me down the hallway like a ghost, her tone shifting again, now wide-eyed, accusatory. You think this is just my fault? You think I was happy? You never saw me. You never asked how I felt. I opened the front door. I saw you, I said. I just didn't know I was watching a performance. She started to cry then, real or fake. I couldn't tell anymore. Her voice broke as she said, please, don't leave me like this. You don't know what I've given up for you. I turned slowly, stared at her, at the woman who once swore she'd never lie to me, now crumbling in the doorway like her own reflection disgusted her. You gave up nothing, I said. You gambled. And you lost. She dropped to her knees, not in grief, but in some twisted play for control, hoping pity would buy her more time. What am I supposed to do now? She whispered, tears streaking her cheeks, makeup smeared like war paint. I crouched to her level, met her eyes with the calm of a man already beyond the reach of chaos, and said, figure it out. Like I had to when I realized the person I loved was a stranger. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Terrified, small, unrecognizable. She reached out to grab my hand. I stepped back, letting her fingers grasp at air. Please, she whispered. We can fix this. I'll do anything. I stared at her hand, then at her face, then said the words that finally shattered the last illusion she was clinging to. There's nothing left to fix. I'm not angry. I'm just done. And I closed the door behind me, not slamming it, just a quiet, resolute click. She didn't follow. She didn't scream. She just sat there, surrounded by the ruins of a game she thought she could win, finally realizing the worst truth of all. It wasn't that I hated her. It was that I no longer cared. Revenge, real revenge, isn't about chaos. It's about architecture. Clean lines. Solid foundation. No cracks. So I didn't storm out of the house that night to disappear. I left to finalize the first phase of a plan I'd already been building in silence. The moment she handed herself to another man, she became a project, a broken structure to be dismantled piece by piece until nothing stood where she once towered. I started with information, gathering every text, call log, photo, and timestamp. I compiled 3 folders, digital, physical, and psychological. Every lie she told me was now in a spreadsheet. Every location ping, every suspicious transaction, every email and DMED soulful connection, quote she shared with Eric under the alias _Elixir. I installed a discrete keylogger and recovered deleted messages she thought were gone forever. I had a backup of everything, duplicated across encrypted drives. 1 copy for my lawyer, 1 locked in a safety deposit box, and 1 sitting quietly on the cloud under a new email she didn't know existed. Then I moved on to logistics. I pulled my name from every joint credit card without a word. The shared bank account? Drained legally. My income had funded 90% of it. The moment she broke fidelity, I rerouted my paycheck into a new account and froze the joint one mid-month. Rent was in my name. Utilities, too. I transferred them out of our apartment and into a separate property I'd secured under a trust 2 weeks prior. She didn't even notice, too busy texting her poetry to Eric from the bathroom while humming like a teenager in love. I waited for her to call the bank in a panic. When she did, I was already in the lobby of our lawyer's office filing the first wave of paperwork. Divorce, irreconcilable differences. Custody, petition for full parental rights, citing infidelity and abandonment. Property division, detailed to the decimal. Every receipt, every investment, everything she thought she'd coast away with because I was soft had already been redistributed to favor one person, me. Then came the social strike. No shouting, no public smear. Just carefully packaged evidence delivered to those whose opinion she most feared losing. Her parents? I mailed them a sealed envelope with a typed letter, photos, and a polite note. I thought you deserved to know the truth before she rewrote it. Her mother called me crying. Her father didn't speak, just sent a single message. We are ashamed. Her best friend Danielle? I invited her to coffee. No dramatics. Just a laptop and 15 minutes of scrolling through chat logs that made even Danielle's face pale. She told me you were cold, controlling, borderline abusive, she whispered. I thought she was trying to survive you. I just smiled and said, she was trying to replace me. Danielle cut her off that same day. Then came her work. She'd used sick days for weekends. Used corporate resources to book hotel rooms under a business alias. I submitted an anonymous tip to HR, with documentation from their own booking system, complete with screenshots, dates, and even internal policy codes she'd violated. A week later, she was called in for a review. I didn't hear the outcome. I didn't need to. The silence told me enough. I took the car too, not through theft, but title. I paid for it. It was registered to me. She came outside one morning to find her key fob disabled and the car gone. Towed, I said via text. Technically repossessed. Paperwork's in your inbox. She stopped responding after that. The final touch was Eric. I met him for coffee. Alone. No threats. No posturing. Just a simple presentation. I know everything, I said. And now, so do you. I handed him a folder with photos he'd never seen, one she sent to someone else while sleeping with him. Messages mocking him. A voice memo where she said, Eric is too weak to leave her. He just needs me to validate him. His hands shook. Why show me this? He asked. Because I wanted you to feel what I felt. I replied. Used. Lied to. Reduced to a utility. He left without finishing his drink. 2 days later, she texted me asking why Eric blocked her on everything. I replied with a single sentence. Your fantasy collapsed under the weight of truth. She didn't respond. She was too busy trying to crawl out from the wreckage of a life that no longer belonged to her. Because I didn't just walk away. I closed every exit. I erased every escape route. And I left her standing in the ruins of her own betrayal, alone, exposed, and entirely powerless. It happened at her sister's baby shower. A pastel affair in the garden of her parents' estate. White tints, ribbon chairs, champagne flutes balanced on manicured fingers. She'd insisted I come, as if trying to regain some twisted sense of normalcy, like we could put on the costume of a happy couple one more time before everything caved in. She wore a lemon yellow dress, smiling too wide, laughing too loud, hugging relatives like she wasn't crumbling beneath the weight of secrets everyone but her thought she still carried alone. But I had already opened the floodgates. Quietly, methodically. A week before the event, I mailed a package to her parents, hard copy printouts of messages, photos, hotel receipts, and a simple note that read, You deserve to know who you're honoring at your next family gathering. I sent a similar file to her sister, timed perfectly so that it arrived the morning of the shower. No anger. No explanation. Just the truth, presented with surgical clarity. And so, when we arrived, hand in hand like actors in a tragic play, the atmosphere had already shifted. The smiles were thinner. Conversations quieted when she approached. Her father didn't greet her at the door. Her mother barely touched her arm. Her sister forced a smile but didn't meet her eyes. She didn't notice at first, too busy performing. Until halfway through the brunch, when Danielle arrived, once her best friend, now fully on my side, and embraced me with a long, deliberate hug. My wife stood frozen, watching. Danielle whispered something into my ear, and we both laughed softly. That was the first visible crack. Her jaw twitched. Her hand tightened around the champagne glass. But she tried to play it cool, floating through the party like a hostess, pretending everything was fine. Then Eric showed up. Alone. Late. Visibly shaken. His tie was loose, his shirt untucked like he'd been dragged there by guilt and force. She moved toward him instinctively, like a magnet snapping back to source. You came, she said under her breath, eyes wide, reaching for his hand. He pulled it away. I need to speak with your husband, he said, voice flat, hollow. Her face drained. Eric, she hissed, not here, please. But he walked past her like she didn't exist and shook my hand. I'm sorry, he muttered. I was lied to. And then he turned, walked out, and didn't look back. The sound of her breath catching in her throat was louder than the clinking glasses. Whispers started. Her sister leaned over to her husband and murmured something sharp. A cousin gave her a look that could slice bone. Her mother stood and walked away mid-sentence. And in that moment, my wife realized the ground beneath her was gone. Her eyes darted across the garden like a caged animal searching for a door that didn't exist. "This is a setup," she blurted, voice rising. "He's manipulating you all." Silence answered her. Her father stood slowly and said, "We saw the messages. We know what you did." Her hands shook. She turned to me, smiling desperately. "You did this. You poisoned them against me. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. I just watched. That's what broke her. My stillness. My calm. The way I stood like a mirror, reflecting the wreckage back at her with no rage, no sorrow, only truth. Say something," she shouted, her voice cracking like glass. "You smug bastard, say something." I blinked. Once. Then said, "They're not angry because of what I told them. They're angry because it came from you." She laughed, high, hysterical, and trembling. "You think this makes you better than me? You think anyone here actually cares what you feel?" She looked around for support. None came. Even the server looked uncomfortable. "I made one mistake," she screamed. "You don't get to burn my whole life down over one goddamn mistake." I tilted my head slightly. It wasn't one mistake. It was months of decisions. Calculated, repeated, and selfish. Her face twisted. She opened her mouth to retort, but then it all collapsed. Her shoulders dropped. Her knees wobbled. Her mouth hung open in a soundless gasp. The tears came not the pretty kind, but the ugly, choking sobs that tear a person from the inside out. She dropped to a chair, hands trembling, mascara streaking down her face like paint washed from a ruined portrait. No one moved to comfort her. Not a single soul. Her mother turned her back. Her sister looked away. Danielle took a sip of wine and stared into the horizon. And I? I stood in the center of it all, the eye of the storm, watching her unravel like a dress caught in a fire. She looked up at me through blurred, pleading eyes. But I didn't move. I didn't offer a hand. I didn't deliver some triumphant final line. I just stood there, a living monument to the price of betrayal. And in that silence, where no one spoke, no one helped, no one cared, she finally understood what she'd done. And worse, who she had become. It happened at her father's birthday dinner, of all places. A grand affair, tuxedos, evening gowns, a rented hall filled with family, friends, and colleagues. Everyone dressed in their finest, laughing, toasting, trying to pretend like the last few weeks hadn't detonated their perception of her. But she still showed up, still wore the fake smile, still clung to my arm in front of the cameras like we were still the golden couple, like the rot hadn't already spilled out of her and into the eyes of every guest in the room. She leaned in and whispered, "Just for tonight, can you drop the act?" And I turned to her, calm and even, and said, "I dropped the act the moment you dropped your clothes for another man." She recoiled, eyes flashing, but the photographers were snapping shots, and the band was playing, and she didn't want to make a scene. But that was never going to be her choice. During the second toast, after her father gave a heartfelt speech about loyalty, love, and the power of family, I stood up, glass in hand, and said, "If only all families lived by the words they toast to." Silence. A few polite laughs. She looked at me, eyes narrowing, panic beginning to bloom. "Sit down," she hissed. "You're not doing this here." I looked around the room. Every important figure from her life gathered, waiting, and said, "No better time than now." She stood, trying to pull me down by the sleeve. I yanked my arm free. "You want everyone to believe in this fantasy you keep rehearsing, but the truth is, every single person in this room has seen the evidence of what you really are." Gasps. Her mother covered her mouth. Her father slowly set down his glass. She tried to spin it, fast, like a politician caught mid-scandal. "This is manipulation," she barked. "He's twisting everything. It's not what it looks like." A cousin stood up. "I saw the screenshots. It's exactly what it looks like." "You don't understand," she shouted, turning to the crowd. I was suffocating. I was dying inside. He treated me like furniture. I stepped forward. "You lied. You cheated. You used me like a credit card and blamed me when the balance came due." She spun toward me, teeth clenched, fury pouring from every syllable. "You were cold. Controlling. You made me feel invisible." I laughed once, dry and hollow. "You felt invisible while wearing dresses I bought, living in a home I built, and sneaking off to hotel rooms paid for by the man you claimed ignored you?" She slapped the table. "You made me this way." I pointed at her, the room dead still. "No. You chose this. You walked into betrayal with your eyes wide open, arms wide open, and legs even wider." Her friend gasped. A waiter dropped a tray. She screamed, "I made a mistake. One mistake." I stepped forward, close enough for only her to hear, but loud enough for all to witness. You didn't make a mistake. You made a pattern. Her knees buckled slightly. You want to blame me? You want to spin this into a sob story? I turned to the room. Here's her sob story. She looked me in the eye every night and said, I love you, while someone else's cologne still clung to her skin. Her father stood up, face like stone. Enough, he said. It's over. She turned to him, suddenly childlike. Dad, please, don't call me that, he said, and sat back down. Her tears came fast, theatrical. Is this what you wanted? She cried at me. To ruin me? You ruined yourself, I said, still calm. All I did was show the mirror. Then, from the corner, Eric appeared. He'd come to return a set of house keys she'd left at his place. He didn't realize she'd still be here. The room turned toward him. She froze, voice cracking. Eric, please. He walked up slowly, handed the keys to her with a blank expression, and said, Don't ever contact me again. She reached for him, pleading, but he backed away like she was radioactive. I lost my wife over you, he said. And you never intended to leave yours. More gasps. Someone started filming. A young cousin whispered, Oh my God. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing now, mascara streaking, dress wrinkled, hair falling from the pins like a character at the end of a Shakespearean tragedy. I watched it all, her destruction, her collapse, her last desperate flailing for sympathy, and I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. Because as she looked up at me, through tears and shame and the ruins of her performance, she saw it. My silence wasn't coldness. It was victory. And nothing she could scream, cry, or claim would ever rewrite the story everyone now knew. She didn't just lose her husband. She lost the only version of herself that anyone had ever respected. She vanished from the social world like a ghost whose name no one wanted to say out loud anymore. Fired quietly from the hospital under the excuse of policy violations after HR followed the anonymous tip and dug up her misuse of company resources, she was escorted out the back door without ceremony, without thanks. The whispers spread like fire in dry grass. Coworkers she once laughed with now refused to meet her eyes. Old friends who used to invite her to wine nights deleted her from their group chats and blocked her on social media in a silent, near-unanimous vote. Her Instagram went dark. Her Facebook became a graveyard of old memories no one liked anymore. Even the little wellness blog she started as her passion project dried up, 0 comments, 0 engagement, because no one wants to take life advice from someone whose own world publicly imploded. Eric vanished the moment the spotlight touched him. Moved out of state, tried to patch things up with his wife, who had already filed for divorce and taken the kids. He changed his number. She tried to reach him. He never replied. Last I heard, she moved 2 cities over into a 1-bedroom rental above a liquor store and took a job answering phones at a veterinary clinic, a far fall from the scrubbed clean pride of her hospital days. Her name no longer carried weight. It carried warning. Her family, shamed beyond words, cut her off completely. Her father told her she had disgraced his name. Her mother returned every gift she had ever given her in a box with no note. Her sister sent a text that simply read, You are not welcome here. Danielle never spoke to her again. People in town stopped making eye contact. A few times I saw her across the street, face hidden under sunglasses, shoulders hunched like someone trying to shrink into the concrete. Once, at a grocery store, she saw me and froze, clutching a carton of eggs like a lifeline. I walked past without a glance. I knew she saw the woman on my arm, my new partner, strong, kind, untainted by betrayal, and I saw the exact moment her heart shattered again. But the worst was still to come. Months later, long after the court finalized everything in my favor, house, car, custody split skewed toward me with conditions she could barely meet, I got a knock on my door. She stood there in the rain, no umbrella, hair soaked, eyes hollow, thinner than I remembered, and wearing a coat 3 years out of fashion. Please, she said, voice raw, just let me say one thing. I didn't move. I didn't speak. She broke the silence with a confession, a stream of tear-choked memories and regrets. I don't even know who I was when I did it. I was stupid, selfish. I thought I needed more. But it was you. It was always you. I thought I could replace you, but there's no one like you. I ruined everything. And I would give anything, to go back and undo it. Just, please tell me it wasn't all fake. That I wasn't nothing to you. I looked at her, soaked, trembling, unrecognizable, and I saw nothing. Not the woman I married. Not the one I mourned. Just the sum of her decisions, standing on my doorstep like a broken promise. It wasn't fake, I said, voice quiet. But it's dead. You killed it. Her lip trembled. I still love you, she whispered, hands clenched, desperate. I stared at her for a moment longer. Then I said, strange. I don't even remember your name anymore. And I closed the door in her face. Thank you for listening to my story. Now tell me, where are you from? And did you enjoy the ride?